This title is narrated with virtual voice, computer-generated narration for audiobooks. Say the quiet part out loud. A book on 2000s Emo Volume 1. By William Ramsey. 1. MTV was still playing music videos. Survivor was the most popular television show and broke the door down for reality TV. A file-sharing website called Napster shook up the music industry and was sued by Metallica and major record labels before its business model would eventually conquer the industry a decade later. The year was 2000, and it would be a year and decade where everyone feared Y2K. A nation would face one of the greatest tragedies in its history, and the birth of the iPod and iPhone would transform the way we consumed music and communicated respectively. It would also be a decade when two important, but different revolutions would happen in rock music. The indie rock revival, i.e. the Strokes, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and the White Stripes. And the explosion of a genre that was vilified by the media, but embraced by the disenfranchised, emo. Although emo got its start in the 1980s with bands like Rites of Spring and Embrace, and got some recognition for its second wave in the 1990s with bands like Sunny Day Real Estate and Cap and Jazz, its third wave in the early 2000s would be far more accessible, making it the genre's true and proper introduction to mainstream consciousness and pop culture. Unlike the indie rock revival, though, emo was not considered cool and was polarizing almost immediately. It wouldn't be until 20 years later that this style of confessional music would be celebrated by the media and appreciated as a significant moment in rock history and youth culture. By the end of the 1990s, pop music made up most of the top 40. The alternative rock revolution, spearheaded by Nirvana in 1991, had mostly been vanquished towards the end of the decade, as boy bands and solo pop acts began to take over the charts. At the start of the millennium, this trend would continue. However, you also had nu metal, post-grunge, and emo's very close cousin, pop-punk, being heavily played on MTV and the radio. Soon, though, a young man who had killer sideburns, an acoustic guitar, and songs about unrequited love would capture the hearts of thousands of teens. Remember when I said Napster had an impact on the music industry? Well, beyond pissing off record execs and well-established bands, the file-sharing site also allowed for lesser-known acts to be discovered by a larger audience. Enter Dashboard Confessional. Starting as a solo side project, Chris Carrabba of emo/indie rock band Further Seems Forever recorded some acoustic songs in his downtime from the band. Those songs would end up on an album called The Swiss Army Romances, and Chris Carrabba would become a one-man band called Dashboard Confessional. The Swiss Army Romance was Dashboard's debut album, and was released in March of 2000. The record only had a pressing of 1,000 copies, and was released by Carrabba's friend Amy Fleischer-Madden, who ran the indie label, Fiddler. Despite the album's initial and limited pressing, songs from the record began popping up online, quickly gaining traction and being shared via message boards. You suddenly had a situation where a relatively unknown artist was being exposed to a much wider audience faster than was ever possible pre-internet. We take it for granted now, but back in 2000 that was revolutionary. There was such demand for the Swiss Army Romance that it got a wider release via drive-through records. The madness had begun. Carrabba would show up to venues filled with kids he had never seen before, who suddenly knew all the words to his songs. I remember seeing Dashboard Confessional's 2002 MTV Unplugged, and was struck by the fact that it was essentially one big sing-along. It felt like the crowd was a part of the band itself. There was this direct bond between Carrabba and his audience. A big part of that bond was the fact that his lyrics were so direct, and sung in such a direct, impassioned, and real way, that they deeply resonated with kids all around the country. Whereas some bands tend to have a veil or separation between them and the audience, no such separation existed at a Dashboard show. It felt more like you were in a living room with friends than at a rock show. It was that level of connection and intimacy that made Dashboard special and emo special. Intimacy and vulnerability are at the core of the genre. Dashboard Confessional may have not been the first band of third-wave emo, but they certainly were one of the most significant. and certainly one of.
To keep listening to this audiobook for free, click the link in the description. It will take you to a free Audible trial where you can listen to this and many other books for free for 30 days.